Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from my friend Tom Sewell's exquisite, unique art studio here in Haiku, Maui, Hawaii. Today, March 18th, 2022, part 2 in this 6-part series, A World in Crises. Our own unique way of finding meaning, if you will, within the madness. A favorite phrase of mine, taking it higher. And today, the topic, just diving into the extemporaneous flow of my own inner being in life, like you, is the attempt, the desire, the vocation, if you will, of making art of our life, making our life art, which is imbuing, if you will, the day, the hour, the minute, the moment with a high regard for aesthetics and the merger, if you will, of sensuality. And for me personally, as a yogi, born from the beloved culture of Myanmar, Burma, multifaceted culture, multi-religions, but for me being a son of Dhamma, a Buddha, not religion, but the vocation, as I understand it in my own humble way, of making consciousness the primary activity of your life for the purpose of evolving freedom and self-responsibility and the regard for creative uniqueness within the lawfulness of the architecture of life in this embeddedness called samsara, or totality, and the fascination, if you will, with learning more and more of dimensionality and the concentric interrelatedness, if you will, of multiple intelligences: biological intelligence, intellectual intelligence, philosophical intelligence, spiritual intelligence, mindful intelligence, anatomical intelligence, cosmological intelligences, the intelligences at this very moment, to state the obvious, but so easily overlooked, that animates this life that we're in. Breathing, emoting, feeling, making love, fearing, crying, dying, birthing, warring, fearing, forgiving, every element in that too, called this moment now, and making that artful. You know, there's one thing to do is be religious, it's another thing to do to be spiritual, but to fuse, for me personally, what I call Dharma art. The vocation of mindful intelligence in relationship to the senses, the vocation of perceiving existence inside and out through the portals of perception, the eye, the ear, the nose, the body, the tongue, the mind, and perhaps there's even more senses yet to be explored. And creatively, uniquely, playfully, delightfully, with complexity at times, struggling to animate what I would call the soul of art, is meaning and purpose and beauty, and keeping alive the truest art, which is creativity and freedom, to live within the form and to keep engaging that form, if you will, with co-creative intelligence, co-creative beauty, inspiring Notre Dames, both inside and outside, inspiring great cinema and poetry and dance and music and you know, for those of you who are here on Maui, for example, Mr. Sewell is bringing together some world-class musicians on, I think it's Tuesday, March 22nd, here at his studio. I think it's 625 East Ku'iaha. Check the address, Sewell Studio in East Ku'iaha. Come, $50 to witness and to watch and to partake of these world-class musicians. I met this young woman the other day, Muriel Roberts, the celloist who's here from New York. She'll be performing with her colleagues and friends in this extemporaneous experimental art form called auditory vibration, made through strings and basses and life together with you and me. Dharma art, the art of keeping alive freedom, compassion, kindness, goodness. You know, I lived in Paris for some years. I was blessed by my very good friend Robert Chartoff, the world-class film producer who's done so many films. I won't drop all the films, but he and I were really close friends. He's passed on, and he bequeathed his apartment in Paris to me to abide. At the time, I was commissioned to do a book by a publisher in France, and I was able to write and go back and forth to Burma, my beloved spiritual home, and also the tragic sacred study indirectly of the psychology of totalitarianism and dictatorship and the confluence of nonviolent, feminine-inspired, call it democracy in action. I wanted to use activism, but it's a bigger struggle than activism alone. And when is violence appropriate, or is it always inappropriate? And I had discussions with the now imprisoned Nobel Peace Laureate and her colleagues over many years and decades on the philosophy and psychology of Dharma art in relationship to politics, and mindfulness and meditation in the challenge of dictatorship and totalitarianism, the power of restraint. The breathtaking discussions I had with Aung San Suu Kyi on the vocation of Dharma artfulness in speaking and listening. You know, she informed me that our violence is not violent in a physical, industrial sense, but we use the power of consciousness, if you will, of voice and timing and tone, like a musical instrument to evoke the possibility of our so-called adversary, our enemy, to awaken to her or to his own shadow, the Jungian term, the denied aspects of one's own interiority. Why do we blame others when in fact it's rooted in our own shame? Why do we harm others when it's rooted in our own lack of self-confidence? The ways in which existence has unartfully, wrongly, tragically sculpted the perversities of the substratum beneath the surface of cognitive awareness that makes women and men do things that are so radically unholy as to commit rape, as to commit war, as to commit massacres and genocides and robberies and desecration. And yes, we're all in this great, strange, sacred, maddening oneness. But art, and so the power of the voice. And when I really think back of my time in Paris and going from Burma and back and forth at the time to Sarajevo in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and in and out of Zagreb, the capital of Croatia during the war, in Paris, where I was doing my book with Aung San Suu Kyi, and conceiving other pieces of art and a film, and just feeling into, how could you not feel the philosophy and the sacred psychologies and the artfulness everywhere you walk and look in Paris. It's a masterpiece of creation. At least it was for me. And of course, an idealistic American coming there, it was a powerful experience. And I often went because I studied medieval cathedrals in Europe when I was in college before I withdrew. And I was very close to Notre Dame, and I would go there on a regular basis to take my notebook and to write and to feel in this great creation of the divine feminine, if you will, as a holy experience, to commune in and to hymn in and to pray in and to feel in the stained glasses of that. And I would often go to the various museums. How could you not? Everyone talks about going to the various museums when you go to Paris. What else is there to do except to breathe the artfulness of this sacred city? Yes, it has its complexities, but please allow me. And I would often go to the museum of the great sculptor Rodin. And I read the biography, or was it the biography of Rodin. And if I'm not mistaken, when he was young, he adored his older sister. And she was to be married, as I understand the story. And tragically, for whatever reason, her husband-to-be did not show up at the moment to be wed. And young Rodin, so deeply in love and respect of his older sister, anyone, a friend, the tragedy of that, the heartbreak of that is epic. We've all been rejected. We all know the pain of rejection. If we were just to pause for a moment and just feel the impression of what that does to our soul, our psyche, our hearts. No one wants to wish upon another person rejection, for whatever reason it is. Individuals reject with impunity, often ghost people, and belittle people in their rejection. And for whatever reason, we've all been a part of that process. And there is young Rodin, maybe 10, 11, and 12, heartbroken, and his parents saw that he was descending into a depression. I don't know whether it was a life-taking possibility depression. I've been there. It doesn't take much. Today I really feel deeply, tragically, for the children, for the about to be born in this world, the inheritance of this earth plane that we are now experiencing here in the cusp of a World War III with nuclear weapons and chemical weapons and bioweapons, and even worse than that, the madness of men, the bravado of men, the feckless hopelessness of the global elite. I'm going to do a film called Raw War, a comedic, irreverent, satirical take up, not take down, to inspire the madness of the masculine toxic genome of the global elites, to snap out of that active volcanic coma of righteous indignation and to manifest, if you will, the beauty. If only I had my wish that President Biden, Xi Jinping, sorry to go off here, the president of Ukraine, Putin, all the men leaders in the world, all the great popes and bishops and archbishops and all the yoga teachers and all the psychotherapists, all the men in leadership, just to nakedize their being and take a high dose of love, called the ayahuasca of transformational purity, whatever, to reduce that armament of not being held by your mother or by the archetypal mother. I don't know. What creates insecurity and arrogance and narcissism in the mind of the human mind? That level of existential psychiatry and the artistry of a new generation getting into the crevasses of this deep mystery of why is there violence manifesting the way that we do. And just be surrounded by beloved, women. Women who understand men. Women who understand the sacred. Women who understand reverence. Women who understand the innateness of the holy that embraces the unholy. What will it take to nonviolently create theatrical moments of musicality and poetry that merge symphonies and time with the moment to reduce this bravado, this arrogance, this sociopathy on a collective scale? Right now, a World War III is a mild term for desecration of life forever. Snap out of it. We must find a way. Well, I'm going to give myself a go with raw war. What does it mean to fight with your heart, with your voice, with your passion, with your artistry? And as I understand the story of Rodin, his parents were lost at what to do. What it is to have a friend and ally show up when you're really hurting, right? Boy, those are really friends. It's far beyond psychotherapy and psychiatry. Those are really rare people in the world. When you're down and you're out, whether you're poor or you're middle or you're rich, it doesn't matter. When your heart is cracked in a million different pieces, you know it could happen to you, it could happen to me again. It's happening to all of us. How can we not have our hearts being broken right now? And when we look and read and see the images and we hear the sounds and the bombs and the shrapnel, these are words on pages, images on screens. Can you hear the screams and the blood dripping all over our naked bodies and our souls? How is it that empathy isn't feeling every life form right here and now and dropping to our holy knees and saying, I am sorry, Lord. I give up my bravado. War is hell and evil. I pull back from the precipice of global annihilation in the name of. Where is your artistry, your poetry, your religion, your holiness? I beg of you, leaders. And his parents took young Rodin to where? The cathedral. The embodiment of unlimited possibility as I read into the study of the true mystical. Unlimited possibility, the dream that's empowered, right? We have the right to dream as large as we can imagine dreaming. Isn't that Notre Dame? Isn't that the divine feminine? Isn't that what's being obstructed in the mind of narcissistic, toxic, violent men in global roles of leadership? The inability to intimize, if there's a word, to sexualize with radiant luminosity. Take your pornography out of your mind, but it needs help. We need holy women ushering in holiness at this time, more and more. And his parents took him to the cathedral. And say the priest, maybe it was a priestess, I don't know. Very clever, as I understand it, and read into it my own little fine print. Young Rodin was so heartbroken, like the millions of boys and girls on the planet right now and adults, heartbroken, heartbreaking. The heart doesn't break and it's over. I think it can break in multiple levels to the point, even if you're suicidal, it's continuing to break. Even if you've overcome your so-called individual, personal, or collective trauma, the window pane of the soul is so sensitive. I can't imagine holding a beloved in my arms, the victim of a death inflicted through anger and desecration, racism, apartheid, regionalism, the lie of Nazification, the lie of enemy, the pornography of blame. And the priest in the biography of Rodin, gave the young man clay. How cool. I don't think Rodin was a famous sculptor at this point. He was in his youth, emerging. Youth can be at any stage, using our voice, using our hands, putting our hands on those strings and the bass, on the pen, on the brush, putting our whole body paint on the canvas of love, touching the breasts of infinity, making love with everything, with beauty and vulnerability and possibility, wonderment through art. And I could just see Rodin looking at the priest. What is this clay? And he's encouraged, put your hands on it, young man. Touch that which is stiff and hard and clay. And he gave him a bowl of water. Mix water with the clay and mold it into anything that you want. And as I understand the story, and go with me in that, right? He brought wonderment and possibility and the emergence of artistry in poetry and musicality and intimacy. He brought his regard for the emergence of an aesthetic. And in this book it said he put his hands on that clay and all of his rage at the blame of someone rejecting my beloved sister in her moment of glory to be wed, and all of those months and hours of making love and promises and dreaming together of families and picnics and work and home and choice together. It's not just an abandonment at the altar of marriage. It's an abandonment of all of those moments of trust and shared existence and creation together. What a betrayal, and isn't that life? It's not the only thing. Think of the betrayal that the Ukrainians feel with the promises of being in NATO. They were led to believe that. Denuclearize your entire country as a precursor to your entry into. Politics are beyond me. I'm just sort of a savant, struggling, kind of lower middle class artist, obsessive, OCD, traumatized, wannabe, can't wait to speak and get back on a stage again and do my satirical, comedic, spiritually incorrect times 10. But Rodin meant a lot to me, and I was in that museum, I remember reading that book, and he put his hand on that clay, and he communicated his rage in clay rather than killing. And jump time. He understood the importance of moisture, the moisture of love, the moisture of self-respect, the moisture of dignity on that clay of self. He began to sculpt his soul into an artist through his hands on clay. I mean, if you've ever gone to the museum, if you've ever seen pictures, get a book, go online, look at those creations. It's unthinkable that that's where the emergence of that artistry began. So beautiful, so cool, so touching. And each of us in our own way, although that we feel our lives to be artistic and we've got that moisture down, but in the activist co-creative way, we're embedded in the clay of everything. And although we have our own little kind of moisture bubbles with our own little bubble tribes of savants and artists, and we live in our little tropical momentary paradise studios, wherever it may be, in city basements and in skyscrapers or in forests around the world, we belong to each other in the artistry of a shared awakening called I Can't Live Without You and You Can't Live Without Me, in the South African concept Ubuntu. Your freedom and my freedom are inseparable. Your dignity and my dignity are inseparable. Your suffering and my suffering are inseparable. We're in the same clay, the same ocean, the same earth, the same universe. And will we bring artistry or will we bring arrogance? So I really wish to communicate today as I close. Find, if you feel inspired, that spark and moisture of hope in the midst of the madness. Take a moment today to walk in nature or even simply sit in the comfort of your own home. And there are many millions around the world, should this be seen by others in circumstances of complexity, wherever you are. And I've interviewed hundreds of political prisoners after their release. Many of them now, under the circumstances in Burma, have been killed or in hiding or been tortured to death or missing. I brought their voices with my colleague Fergus Harlow to the world. We're nothing compared to the voices of freedom in Burma, the voices of freedom in Russia, the voices of freedom in China, the voices of freedom in Ukraine, the voices of freedom in America, in Canada, England, in Germany. We are the people of the art. We are putting our hearts and hands on the clay of the global elitists, and we're massaging in our own creative, punk, rad, millennial, punk, pink, blue, crazy, satirical, theatrical, non-violent, communicable way. We see you. We are not going to participate in your pathology. We're going to do everything to create a sculpture of hope where your clothes of narcissism become reduced to your body being naked like mine. And the divine feminine will reach you as well. And you'll weep from your shame and your arrogance, and you'll come on board. Let's not lose hope despite the pornography of the legacy media barreling down on war porn. Where is hope? Through de-escalation, through the power of voice, the power of communication, the power of possibility. When I think of Rodin and I think of art, it's wonderment, it's possibility, it's taking something out of what appears to be nothing. But in there is clay. Clay is earth. It's not clay, it's not wrong. It's understanding the conditions. Art are conditions. Strings, bass, tuning, the expertise of training and practice, meditation, art, singing, voice. I'll close here. How many friends I know right now are imprisoned in Burma, elected leaders of a democratic government, and the world does not for one moment hear the screams or the cries or the collective courage of the people of my beloved Burma. They have been utterly abandoned by the United Nations, the Security Council, the EU, America, by all civilized countries. They have been utterly abandoned based upon the principles and the statutes of the United Nations. There are no conversations being had except mild sanctions. A full-fledged emerging democracy that challenged nonviolently totalitarianism and dictatorship imposed upon them by 135 years of white supremacist imperialism from England. No offense, I'm an American. We've desecrated the Native American in a genocide, as they did in Canada and in Australia. Wherever the white man seemed to spread, they did it through calculated acts of mass murder. I'm not proud of that heritage, but guess what? I've taken my clay and put my hands on it. It was hard to be in Burma, to suffer the various consequences of disease and illness and struggle and language disparities. I've been a fighter. You've been a fighter. I know many of you have been fighters. Art is not the relinquishing of stealth. Sometimes art communicates radical, raw war. The intensity, if you look at the mandalas from the Tibetan tradition, the Islamic tradition, the Hindu tradition, they do not exclude the devil and Satan and ugly, shaming, radical, perverse behaviors throughout existence, but they equally understand the radiance of enlightenment and beauty, right? We're all in this together. And we know the power of love. We know the power of integrity, the power of moral courage. We are on the right side of history. And I implore you, I encourage you to encourage me should I forget that we have our voice. We have our conscience. We have our soul, which is dignity. When I interviewed political prisoners, I asked them often, how did you manage to survive 20 years of incarceration, often being tortured? And a lot of them that survived, and many didn't. My dignity was never theirs to take. The way that we ate, the way that I ate the miserable animal food, not fit for a dog, I ate it with dignity, mindfully. Although it was putrid, I drank from the wretched water. And although that was rusty and horrible, I drank it with dignity. Although I slept on a cold concrete floor for a night, without the right pillow, it's anguish. 20 years without a pillow or a blanket, with mosquitoes and bugs and roaches and centipedes and the persistent likelihood of guards and torture. I lied and breathed in dignity. That is so rad that there are women and men. There wasn't just men. I've interviewed women who speak this way. Although I'm paraphrasing a lot, but if you read our books, Burma's Voices of Freedom, in their words, long form interviews, and I've got a film also, I'm going to tell my story of Burma. Hundreds of hours of footage and stills. It's not about my story, but it's a way to tell the story of a sacred country that's in the artistry of an earth. They birthed the art of mindful intelligence in the context of social, economic, religious, and ethnic illumination. I've never seen the power of consciousness in the context of dictatorship emerge such a beautiful expression of art, and it's been desecrated, but it still is alive in their theater, in their music in Burma today. What you see coming out of there is so amazing. And it's coming out of the Ukraine as well. It's going to come out of Russia as well. It's going to come out of America. Although that theater was bombed, the drama theater in Marisol. The artistry of art in the spoken word and poetry, we've got a radical renaissance coming up, girls and boys. I say, make your film, write your poetry, make your music, and make it infused with the transformational awakening of democracy and freedom and the overcoming of tyranny. Make it so political that it's holy. Make it a Notre Dame, an art form of liberation. Use our voice. Use our hands. Give the children, I tell myself every day, give your daughter, give the children, give the unborn, the about to be born, hope through our action. Give them a Notre Dame on this earth. Give them moisture to put into the clay of tyranny and narcissism. And let us do something together and give, as it's been said. Peace and artful expression in our beloved world. So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in. God willing, see you tomorrow here from Hawaii at 10 a.m. if I can. A few announcements. As I mentioned, on Tuesday the 22nd, Mr. Sewell here at 625 or 628 East Ku'iaha in Haiku, Maui. It's an open event at 5 p.m. with a group of sacred musicians. I've been blessed to meet one of the women, Muriel Roberts, a celloist who's here, along with some of her friends and colleagues that she's met. They'll be playing. It's $50 at the door. It's 17 acres of magic. Come, bring your friend if you're on Maui, and let's bring our art and heart to this soulful event. I also am blessed to say, over 2 years, through a variety of great people, Terry and Ian and Gemma and Jeff and Fergus and so many others, I filmed 10 hours, 37 chapters, 61 one-minute video clips that have been beautifully edited by Gemma McGovern, a real artistic savant. And we finally, after all of the pandemic and struggles that I've gone through and everyone's gone through, we have a video book, a World Dharma practical video guide to the practice of Dharma art, which is the Dharma art of mindful intelligence, of finding liberation through living. It's my World Dharma 2.0. It's a distillation of the East and the West, the psychedelic, the psychotherapeutic. It's art in the simplest discernible language that have subtitles and notes, and jump in, and we're going to have Zoom calls of dialogue. The World Dharma Forum is going to be brought into focus as soon as I situate again and get into my own home. All this is coming, but the video book is on Vimeo on demand. It's in pre-order right now. It's going live April 7th. And I'm blessed to say that I conceived and wrote a book, a children's book dedicated to my beloved daughter, Sarabella, and to the children in this world, and to the unborn, titled Tonight I Met a Deva, an Angel of Love. And I was very blessed to have His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, write a foreword to this book, along with some extraordinary endorsements that really made me cry to read people on how they were so touched by this small book that brings forth in poetic rhyme the most important teachings I've ever experienced in my lifetime. The Buddha's Four Noble Truths, made accessible to, I hope, a child's mind. I'm told that between 7 and 12 it seems to be right, but an adult could read them as well. And my real sole purpose was to create an intimate dialogue between family about the artistry of consciousness and context, of how to overcome conflict, how to inspire harmony in a non-sectarian, trans-religious way. But that book is now in pre-order on Amazon worldwide. It's been beautifully designed by Justin Lasso, my longtime colleague and designer from New Zealand, and brilliantly illustrated by 4 profound Dharma artists, from Dakini as art. The art itself, the illustrations to these 60 pages in itself is a Dharma feast. And so may I invite you to invite your friends, to tell schools and libraries and bookstores. It's up on Amazon now for pre-order. Tonight I Met a Deva, an Angel of Love. And may I encourage you to check it out, and if moved, to acquire it and tell your friends from my heart to yours. There's other things as well, but I'll leave that for another time. So have a beautiful day, and thank you for being in my life.